Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to talk to somebody who is continuously fighting for our betterment, and with some of the issues coming up, we're appreciating all the efforts. I don't know if we get more or we're just fighting to keep where we're at, but why don't we start with an introduction?
Well, Al, it's great to be back here in Milford. Great to be on that Milford show, and just want to wish everybody a very happy and healthy new year for 2016. I'm State Senator Ryan Fatman, and have the honor and privilege of representing the Worcester-Norfolk District in the State Senate. And I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and I'm looking forward to this new year.
So now, the district, is it 13 towns?
14.
14?
Yep. 13 in Worcester County and 1 in Norfolk County, Bellingham. Great town.
I get a kick out of Bellingham. Somehow they got half of John and one street.
Yeah,
They
right.
gave John Fernandez one street, so now him and Jeff Roy have to work together.
It's tough when your population is shrinking and then growing and
I
shrinking.
kept saying, can we trade away a street?
Yeah,
You know, so we get 2 representatives.
make it like a baseball transaction. Yeah.
But in the Senate, you have to represent 14 towns.
Yeah, 14 towns, and in some instances there's similarities, in many cases a lot of differences, not just between the people, but the character of how the town's economy is made up. Milford, Bellingham are much more industrious parts of my district. You got a ton of businesses here, a lot of people who are working here for major corporations, whether it be Waters Corporation or the hospital, or out the other way, when you look at sort of the middle part of the district, it's a lot more rural, maybe a little bit suburban in some areas, but there's a lot of farming. Especially in Sutton and in Dudley, they have active farms, and that's how people make their living. So it's really a cool place to represent, and it has, as the person representing the district, there's a lot of issues you need to learn, and I've really enjoyed that over the last year.
So now, when they cut the district, is it so that they minimize the Republican effect?
Well, that's always a debate.
And I'm not
right?
picking on the Democrats, because I'm certain that if you get up to the square states,
Yeah.
where they're red,
Right.
they're going to draw. Because I used to laugh at Richie Neal
Yeah.
with the Banana Republic.
Right.
Somehow from Springfield all the way to Milford, it was like one long banana,
Right.
and it was like, why?
Well, I think there's no question that the process could probably be better. I think, there's been a lot of pushes, and I myself have included this as part of my agenda to try to create an independent redistricting commission that's not partisan, that's not trying to give this person a political edge over this person. And part of the reason why is when I ran in 2010, I had challenged a Democrat incumbent who had been there for a while and beat that individual, and then a year later was redistricting, and my entire district was flipped around on its head. And so there was, I think, some politics involved in
We'll
that.
teach that young whippersnapper to beat us.
And the good news is I was able to get reelected, and I got 71% of the vote. But, that was a lot of work, having to go back out there to pretty much 85% of the district had changed. And going back out to 85% of these people who had never met me, and having to campaign all over again and introduce myself. So I enjoyed it. It worked out great, and I now find myself in the state Senate, which is a blessing. But it was a lot of work, and there was definitely politics in the process.
Stephanie was probably the only happy one saying, good, he's out of the house more.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But I worry less about how much work it was for you, even though I will feel bad.
Yeah.
But you learn a district.
Yeah.
You learn the people. You learn how to effectively represent them. And then they change it.
Yeah.
You only have, 2 years?
Right.
By the time you learn the new district, aren't you almost ready for re-election?
And the part of the problem too, and that's absolutely correct, part of the problem is that when they do these redistrictings every 10 years and you lose a significant portion, people then scratch their heads and they say, well, wait, what happened? Where'd he go? Did he not like us?
Right.
And
you abandoned me.
Right. Exactly.
You don't love me anymore? You don't show up?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that played out a little bit in 2014 in my election for the state Senate, because my district had changed so much. I lost the town of Bellingham, Blackstone, Millville, and so I was out campaigning there, and people were like, I thought you were our state representative, and then it changed, and how did that happen? So you had to kind of talk your way through that and explain it. But thankfully, it's a process that only happens every 10 years. So if we had to do this every 2 or 4 years, that would be quite a pain.
But it's also the problem that if it happens every 10 years, if they don't get it right, like Richie's banana,
Yeah.
it's a decade before they can change it.
Yeah, and there's also, well, not necessarily, because the congressional redistricting is incredibly succinct. And so the rule, based on the Constitution and law that's been, litigated by the Supreme Court is, you have to be within pretty much one person. There's some leeway with that, but now there's a huge Supreme Court case about what an actual representative represents. Do they represent
Legal, non-registered?
And this is right now. It's pretty much residents, and residents are not defined. The Supreme Court challenge could be that it's active voters or eligible voters, people who could actually vote.
But Ryan,
even if they're not registered,
I don't
if they're
wanna,
eligible to register,
right,
that
I don't want to
count.
be cold about it, but if you tell me, and we'll get into some of the side issues in a few minutes, but I have 5,000 illegal residents.
Yep.
What rights do they have?
Well, technically, right now, under the way it works with redistricting and congressional, they are counted as individuals in the process. And I personally don't think that should happen.
I'm confused. Why? I'm paying you.
Yeah.
I know this sounds cold, but my taxes pay your salary.
Right.
And I'm electing you to represent me and the residents of Milford,
Yeah.
not the illegal
Right.
residents. I know, even though Milford's the center of the universe, we can't dictate federal immigration policy.
Right.
It's not like we can deport them to Woonsocket.
Yeah.
But why am I going to be comfortable?
I don't think you should. I ran on immigration issues, and a lot of people like to dismiss them as issues that the federal government has only involvement with, and I just disagree with that. I mean, there are many issues that kind of come down to the state level that immigration plays a role in, and quite frankly, this would be one of them because it's the state legislatures that do all the redistricting. The federal Congress does not do it, so you have 50 different processes in the entire nation. Some are better than others, but I think when you consider the fact that there's a lot of frustration out there amongst people who see this happen, and then they get even more angry, and I don't think it's necessarily about being cold. I think it's about being fair. People expect fairness. They want their government to be representative of what they believe and see themselves in it. And for the most part, Americans play by the rules. And that's what they expect from their government too. And sort of the gerrymandering and games that are played in politics to try to give someone a political edge, even if someone may not be a legal Massachusetts or U.S. citizen, I think they get really frustrated by that. The good news is I actually sit on the election committee. So if I'm privileged enough to stick around when they do redistricting, and earn re-election, that I'll have a significant say in this, I hope. And there's been some proposals before our committee that talks about allowing people who are here unlawfully to vote in local elections, which I believe is, the first step. And then it's like, well, if you allow them in local elections to vote in municipal elections, why not do state elections?
Then federal, wait a minute.
Yeah, and this is
So
really,
why should I become a legal resident? So I can pay taxes?
and I think that's where, a lot of people scratch their heads and are saying, what's going on? Another big issue, this is something that I think is very germane to the town of Milford because of the unfortunate instances of people having died in car accidents.
You mean the work on the DMV you're doing?
Yeah, so essentially, for a few years ago, after the unfortunate passing of Matthew Denise, everyone asked, well, how is it possible for Nicholas Guaman to go in and register a vehicle? And there was this thing called the X-registration loophole, and the legislature was supposed to have closed this. But unfortunately, the Governor Patrick at the time, had the ability to promulgate some regulations that kind of expanded the definition of what counts as a document for residency. And so the legislature said, well, let's make it a license, a Massachusetts license. Let's make it a social security number, a green card.
Passport, green card.
Yep.
Those seem good.
Things that represent actual representation that you live somewhere in Massachusetts. Well, the Patrick administration came out and said, well, why don't we add an additional 36 criteria for this? And amongst those 36,
please don't tell me like an electric bill.
Utility bills, electric bills, tuition bills for college student. I mean, these dramatically expand the definition. And so having recognized this, having had the Maloney Denise family reach out to me a few months ago and say, hey, has anything happened with this? I wrote a letter to the RMV, Commissioner Devaney, and also to the governor and said, hey, what's going on here? Is this still the standard? And if it is still the standard, can we change it? The answer back was absolutely we can change it. But we had some additional questions. For example, tell me how a cell phone bill or a utility bill, electricity bill represents residency.
Well, but Ryan, if I want to fly, you just flew on to celebrate a little thing happening in your life.
Yeah, sure.
And you showed up to Logan with your electric bill and a ticket on the plane.
Right.
What are the odds on you getting on that plane?
Yeah, probably not.
Well, why? If it's good enough to vote.
And not only that, I probably would be detained.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about it. You sit there and say, wait a minute, I can't go into an airport because they want a government-issued ID.
Right.
So I have no problem, passport, Massachusetts license, those things make sense.
Yeah.
But if I show up even to some courthouses with my water bill and say, see, let me in, that's me, they're probably going to laugh at me and say, shoot.
Right.
So how is it good enough to register a car?
And this is, I think, sort of a more liberal mentality that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has had. And unfortunately, in some instances, there's been high stakes and real tragedy. And so we want to close this. I think we can do it before the end of this year. I know that's a long ways away, but that's a huge goal for me. I think it's something that if we pressure the right people, including Governor Baker, we can see this extended loophole, because we really didn't close the loophole that existed previously, closed.
But
and
I'm just
I think it
asking
can be
for
a big victory.
Plain old common dang sense.
Yeah.
When you sit there and say, why is it they want a government-issued ID at the airport?
Yeah.
Because public safety. Well, a 3,000-pound projectile called an automobile,
Right.
why wouldn't that come under, we saw it with, unfortunately, what happened here in Milford.
Right. Yep.
Okay? Why wouldn't you have to, and I'm not going against any immigrant, you got a legitimate passport, legitimate driver's license,
Right.
then you have no problem.
I think if we made, we always point to the federal government and saying, oh, it's their responsibility. But actually, if the state adopted some of the federal mentality of how we enforce these laws and created standards, which I think is important, standards really mean something, you would see the problem disappear. I'm not saying it would go away completely, because there's always going to be bad actors. And the vast majority of people who come to this country legally or on a green card or whatever it might be, they are good people. They want to do the right thing. They're here for the American dream, just like our families came for. But then you have people who don't want to play by the rules, and they find ways to find loopholes in the system. And now, I think it's becoming more serious, especially with the state of the world. This is not just a public safety standpoint locally, and who's driving on our roads and are they equipped to be driving and have the skills to do so. But it's now a national security threat, because if you have people coming in and just registering vehicles and not having to really report who they are, and then driving to different states and crossing state lines, how can you track those individuals? And to me, that's where I get really nervous about this, and I think we have to take an honest look at it and reevaluate.
But you've hit it on a local level. Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to debate the importance of what you're saying, look at the Denise family.
Yeah, right.
And to tell them, well, it should have been done by the feds, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not right.
That dog don't hunt.
Yep, 100%.
That's pushing, blaming somebody else. The fact is, we can't do it as Milford.
Right.
So the next logical case to me is to go to the state level and say, how do you put up with Logan Airport not letting a person in using the same criteria, but you're going to let me register a vehicle?
Right.
You want me to vote using a water bill?
Yeah.
This becomes Chicago, vote early and often.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's unfortunate. And like I said, this is a main priority for me this year. We've done a lot of behind the scenes work to try to effectuate some change, and we're getting there.
But what is the logic on the other side? I mean, I don't understand.
I think maybe they feel that it's a targeting thing, maybe a profiling thing. I'm not really sure. I don't agree with it.
I'm profiling illegal people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I'm not profiling white, black, yellow, green, purple.
Right. It's really about a standard. Once
Yeah.
again, you're talking about a status and a standard, and if you're not doing things the lawful way, we should put in rules that say, you have to. And that's as simple as it is.
So you think you got a good chance of putting that one through?
I do. Yeah, I think you have a governor and a lieutenant governor that literally, with a swipe of their pen, can change this, because it was not a statute that created all these different standards and identifications. It was promulgated
So it's kind
regulations.
of like the good Obama executive,
Yeah.
let's get around the Congress.
It's one of
orders.
the good executive orders, I think. The administration can say, this is what we're willing to accept and this is what we're not. And if I have to go through the legislative process, I will. This to me is, I'm looking at May, which is when we take up the budget, and it will be an amendment. If we haven't figured this thing out by May, I'm going to file an amendment. Now, the Senate is a very liberal place. I've learned that quite often in the last year. There's a lot of good people there. I enjoy working with them, but their ideas are very, very liberal. And, that's okay. You have to work across party lines. But I think by the mere fact of bringing attention to it, that puts people on the record. And then 6 months later, after we have this in May, you got an election in November. And that's where people can really effectuate change, because if you don't like the way your representative or your senator has performed, especially on an immigration issue or a common sense security issue, standards, you can change them. And that's as simple as it gets.
I would have a hard time believing that somebody's going to get up in front of the cameras and register that they don't want controls. We don't want because, again, I want to fly on a plane.
Right.
It's just that simple.
And you'd be surprised. A lot of people do. I remember vividly when I was in the House of Representatives for a few years, one particular individual from the Newton area talking about welfare reform and how it was a war on poor people. And there's no one in my belief, that is legitimately looking and scrutinizing a problem that would say that. When you can use cash benefits to purchase alcohol and tobacco products and lottery tickets, that's not
But
legitimate.
we had the same issue when they said you can't put a picture on an EBT card.
Right. Yep.
And I'm like, I'm totally confused.
Right.
If I legitimately want to use my EBT card, why am I scared to have my picture on it?
Yeah. Facebook can connect millions of people online, and you can't put a photo on a card. Give me a break.
And what do I have to hide? Excuse me,
Yeah.
that's me.
Yep.
I was happy when Citibank put a picture on my credit card.
Yeah.
Because if somebody ever got their hands on it, and you have some young kid and they say, look, the picture on there's a fat old bald man, it doesn't line up.
Right.
And to me, it was just extra security. I was happy to have that picture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all these programs are good programs developed as trampolines, where you fall down, you hit that trampoline, and you bounce back up on your feet, and you become a productive member of society. And I think, especially as we're moving into 2016, that the message for common sense people who maybe lean a little bit more conservative in their outlook on life has to be about opportunity and the ability to overcome that poverty, the ability to overcome, the tough times that you fall upon. And I think we have a lot of great stories in Milford about that, and I think we have a lot of great stories in Massachusetts and our nation about that, and we just have to have them told. And if we do, I think we win the day.
So now we talk about 16.
Yeah.
We're not hearing good words about the budget.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a tough budget year. I think the governor had inherited a pretty difficult situation. As you're familiar, when he came into office, he had about a $700 billion deficit from the year previous. So it wasn't even his first budget, and he was inheriting a budget that had about $1 billion off. And that was a real challenge.
Yeah, so you got to make up for the $750 million you're in the hole.
Yeah.
And then you're looking over the hill saying, and there's $1 billion coming my way.
Exactly. And to his credit, and I think to the legislature's credit, they did so without raising taxes or looking at trying to increase fees. And that was a promise that the governor had made. Quite frankly.
And it was amazing. I didn't think many people believed he'd pull it off.
Yeah, and he went, rolled up his sleeves, and offered common sense solutions, engaged the legislature. It's why he's the most popular governor in the country. The most popular person in politics right now is our governor, Charlie Baker. And I think it speaks to the fact that he has been willing to engage people. This afternoon, 3 o'clock to 4:47, I was in a meeting with him because he made a commitment to all the Republican legislators that I will meet with you.
Is that 6 or 12?
Well, it's actually up to 41 when you count the Senate and the House.
Both, okay.
Yeah, there's
okay.
200,
Right.
and there's 41. I'm pretty sure there's 30. Yep, there's 41. 35 in the House and 6 in the
I was going to
Senate.
say, the Senate...
We're a little bit outnumbered in the
I
Senate.
remember seeing
but-
the list, and then I looked at Charlie and said, what are those pariahs? He goes, those are the Republicans.
Yeah, right.
There's 6 of them over there.
Well, you know what's interesting is when you look at a map and you look how well Charlie Baker did, he won by 41,000 votes in 2014 statewide. He carried a vast majority of the state when you look at it as a total map. A lot of it was for Charlie Baker. But when you take the results and break them down by Senate district, while we have 6 in the legislature, at the time we had 4, we had a 50% increase. He actually won 27 of 40 districts. So if you listen to what his message was and then translate that down ticket into Senate races, he won 27 out of the 40 seats. And what's really interesting, and one of the reasons why I ultimately decided to run for the legislature, because I thought it was about accountability, is in the 27 districts that he won, 4 were incumbent Republicans, and there was 4 others, so 8 total, were actually challenged. So you had a whole nother 21 seats that he won that there was no challenger whatsoever. And so I think that speaks to the fact that we need more competition in our politics. We need to have an accountability system where good candidates on both sides of the aisle are running and offering good ideas. And, he's capitalized upon a lot of what he said he would do and playing out. And one of the things he said, he'd be more than happy to reach across the aisle and work with the other side. How can you not? They've got the majority. But in order to extend a hand, you have to open up your fist. And I think that's happened on both sides, which is fantastic.
Well, but part of it to me is when you look at the average Massachusetts voter, I've always said I have a hard time distinguishing between a conservative Democrat and a liberal Republican in Massachusetts.
Right.
Because, you see the extremes. Or let's say the sides, because the extremes scare me either way.
Yeah.
The ultra-liberals scare me as much as the ultra-conservatives.
Right.
Because they're voting dogma, and to me, that's a waste of a vote.
Yeah.
You got to think.
Right.
But you got a small part that's blue to blue, red to red, but then it seems like the vast majority are in the middle. How else could you really say that the most popular governor in the United States of America is a Republican living in a Democratic state?
Right. Especially Massachusetts.
Especially one like Massachusetts that's always been blue.
Yeah.
Maybe Reagan day,
Right. Right. I think it just speaks to the fact that he has taken a bipartisan approach, and he's taken on a lot of issues that Republicans haven't talked about. It's like, I'm a younger guy. I think that's pretty clear. I'm 31 years old, and there's a lot of things that I see the Republican Party doing that I don't think it should be. They put forward sometimes an agenda that I don't think is as inclusive as it could be. One of the things we have not done is we have not gone out to urban communities and talk about drugs and how they ruin families' lives and how we can take addiction and get rid of it by simple means of engaging those communities and then making them, and those people who get addicted, productive members of society that want to live life. And it's not just urban areas, it's areas like Milford. You see in the news, there was 1,200 people who passed away last year, 2015, from addiction and opioids. 1,200 lives ended needlessly. And that's the kind of thing that Charlie Baker has been talking about. I've known Charlie for a few years, so I'm a big advocate for him. And, he's not paying me to say all these nice things about him, but I think he is tapping into something that is affecting everybody, but isn't necessarily talked about all the time. energy issues. Republicans have kind of shied away from talking about those things sometimes, and I think that's another one which we can engage upon in trying to help people and make them successful, prepare them for the best life possible.
Well, when you look at it, I mean, you get out to the square states and you see the deep red, and there's certain questions you must reply. You hear the word gay, and I think most of us say, who cares?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so. But certain areas, unless you say bad,
Right.
well, you don't count.
Right.
The whole abortion issue, unless you say never.
Right.
Okay, you're not a Republican.
Right.
And I sit there and, it's funny because when we do the liberal view, they look at me and say, you're way too conservative.
Right.
You can't ever be a Democrat because you're too conservative fiscally.
Yeah.
But then I got Eddie and the crew on the conservative view saying, oh, you're a dang liberal. And it's like, I'm purple.
Right.
I can't be red, I can't be blue.
Yeah.
Because I want to look at the issues that affect us.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree.
And I just don't agree with, I can't be a good Republican unless I answer these questions. I can't be a good Democrat unless I do this.
Right. And that's the thing, I think that's what frustrates the American public greatly, is especially when they look at Washington, D.C., and they don't see things getting done, and it's because people have dug themselves into trenches and refused to get up. It's like World War I all over again. Just instead of throwing actual grenades and shooting with rifles, people are using their words and Twitter and
Yeah,
Facebook.
turd grenades.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just throwing out.
But it becomes trench warfare, and how many inches can I move towards, and to me, that is not the way politics should be. It's the reason why a lot of millennials in my generation have said, enough, I don't care. And it's the exact opposite thing that needs to be happening, because if you think about it right now, there is so much taxation without representation going on. And it's a generational wealth transfer where $18 trillion has been spent by the federal government that we do not have, that my generation, my children, and their children will have to pay. And so many from my generation don't believe that they can make a difference. And it is so clear, if you're up and awake and alive and paying attention, that you can. I had beat someone who had been around for a long time. Joe Kennedy came around, he won election. He's a young guy making a difference down in Congress. I don't always agree with him, but you know what? He's trying.
But you know something? Young Joe comes on the show, and his views are a bit more liberal than mine.
Yep.
But it's a Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan thing.
Yeah.
I can respect him. He seems like he's got his heart in the right place.
Yep.
And he's really fighting for what he believes.
Absolutely.
How do I not respect that?
And I got to give him so much credit. I talked to him once. We went out for breakfast one day in Boston when he was around, and we were talking, and I said to him, one of the things I admire most about you and what you've been able to achieve is elevating the conversation and making it almost post-partisan. You have your ideas, but you're not willing to tear down others who don't share that idea. And they offered him a position. I mean, the Kennedy name is clearly the second most, great name in politics. Fat
Next
Man
to Fat Man, yeah.
Exactly. Fat Man being the best.
But is it Fat Man Stephanie or
Probably.
I was like, which one comes first?
It's probably Stephanie Fat Man. But if you look at, they offered him, the Democratic Party offered him a position on the DCCC, the Democratic Campaign Committee's political arm, if you will. And they said, we'd like you to lead it. And he said no. And the reason why he said no is that means I'll be targeting some of my Republican friends
People
for
I
defeat.
need to compromise with me and get programs done.
Exactly.
You know,
because
but-
the Republicans control Congress, and I would rather work in a bipartisan manner. How can you not respect that? Now, some people on this side and some people on this side would be infuriated by it, but I think that that's, the standard to which we need to try to reach.
But again, that to me is the guy who's really in the middle, the purple guy.
Yeah.
Because it's not dogma.
Right.
And unfortunately, if you do take a leadership role in the Democratic Party or the Republican,
Right.
you best be speaking dogma.
Yeah.
Because when you got a hotly contested election,
Yep.
you're going to help put darts
Right.
in the candidate that you're then going to go next week and say, hey, Ryan, I need,
Yeah.
I come and urinate on your sneakers, and then next week I come over and say, I need help.
Yeah, I need a tissue.
Well, excuse me, my socks are still wet. I don't think I want to help you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when the American public goes to work every single day and they all have people that they don't like to work with, but they do, they get really frustrated by it. They have goals that they have to achieve at work or they get fired. And when they go and see their representatives not doing that, they have a major issue with it. John Fernandez is a great example. He and I have worked great together over the last year. And we had a public forum that was hosted by the citizens of Milford. And I think it was very clear when we sat there over at, I think it was St. Mary's Church that we were at, it was very clear we worked well together. Do we always agree? Absolutely not. Are our voting records analogous? No, they're not. They're not the same. But you know what? We can talk. We can work through any differences we have. And I think that that's what people expect.
Well, that's
it's what they deserve.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, candidly, I don't want to hear that you're sacrificing Milford for the common good of the Republican Party.
Right.
First of all, I pay your salary.
Yep.
Not somebody in Iowa.
Right.
So if you've got to work with a Democrat, then, especially in Massachusetts, you have no choice, but I expect you to do what's right for the town.
Right. Absolutely.
And the 14 other towns, or
Yep.
13 other towns.
Yep. No question about it.
So now, as we talk through this, we'll get back to the budget in a minute, but your take on the elections?
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think if it hasn't interested you yet, wait for the next 2 months. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever experienced this type of an election, partly because we live in a country that has changed radically in a lot of ways, and in some ways right underneath people's feet without even realizing it. And it's mostly technology that's changed it. It's the mechanisms for which we get our news. If you'd like to just hear and live in a tunnel and only hear what you believe, you can do that in these days. Back in the day, news was kind of 1, 2, 3 channels, not 27, not 35. You couldn't necessarily turn on the radio and just hear your perspective. So I think that that's changed things a lot. I think what we've tapped into tonight and talking about people going to work and frustrated because they have to work with the people that they don't necessarily like, but they see Congress not doing the same thing. I think that has probably changed things a lot. And part of the 24-hour news cycle.
CNN.
This never ends. Just one thing that's a side note. It's like, kids, they talk a lot about bullying these days. And, everyone got bullied in one way or another when you were younger. The difference is, especially for someone like me, is if I ever got bullied, I went home to a safe place and I was with my parents and with my family and I'd be venting to them my frustrations, but it ended. Nowadays, it follows you home because it's online,
The minute
it's
you go
on
Facebook,
email.
you can't get away.
You can't leave. And so that's sort of the same way with our news. I have tried to stay off of Facebook now because I can't stand seeing, these sometimes crazy things. Obama is not a United States citizen. I mean, and you can't get away from it in your newsfeed. And I'm like, that's not why I joined Facebook. I joined it to stay in touch with my friends. I think that these types of things have created an inundation, an overwhelming atmosphere for the political process. And people really would like to see it over. Having said all that, there's a lot of similarities in what's going on in both the Republican and the Democratic primary.
Months ago, I made a joke where I said, my biggest nightmare is come November, I'm going to walk into the booth and have a choice between somebody who lies to me and somebody who makes fun of me.
Right.
And I sat there and said, oh, God, please don't make that happen. Yet, here we are, and it's awful close to believing.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, a lot of people have paid a lot of attention to Donald Trump, and I think that speaks to some of the frustrations that people who are a little more conservative or very conservative or Republicans, that they're really frustrated with their party. I think on the other side, if you look at it and consider Bernie Sanders, there's a lot of people on the Democratic side supporting Bernie Sanders. He's winning in New Hampshire. He's only, I think I saw a poll 2 days ago that he's 7 points behind.
It's like within 5-point variance,
Which
he's
is
within 1 or 2 points.
And that's the same position that Barack Obama was in 2008 against Hillary Clinton. And so you're seeing some deja vu. And I think it speaks to a frustration that both Republicans and Democrats have about generational power. We live in a country where there's 150 million families. There's 300 million people. So I guess a little bit less, 100 million
100 odd
families.
million.
And so you got to tell me that there's only one or two families that can consistently govern this country.
Right.
We're that untalented? I mean, come on, we're better than that. And I think that is somewhat frustrating to see another, especially for my generation, see another Clinton, see another Bush. And, while I might be more ideologically aligned with a Bush over a Clinton, I still think that that's ridiculous, that we can do a lot better than one last name, just
But
governing
you
the
turn
United
around
States.
and you say, okay, how do you, I asked when young Joe Kennedy was on the show, I said, help me understand. I hear blah, 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 socialist, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They have all these adjectives
Yeah.
to soften socialist.
Right.
But didn't we just spend our generation proving that capitalism works better than socialism?
It definitely
So
does.
how is it that so many people, now, initially like the Donald Trump vote, I thought it was like when the people in California vote for Mickey Mouse for governor
Right.
in the primary,
Yeah.
just to kind of send a message, like you say,
Yeah.
I'm not real happy with the way you're behaving.
Yeah.
But when it came down to the election, they would be very serious.
Right.
I'm scared to death.
Well, here's one thing that may lift your spirits. Most polling, and this is really in the weeds, but most polling shows that people in Iowa and New Hampshire don't make up their minds until the last 72 hours.
The last week, they said.
Yeah, last 72 to 96 hours is when they really have an idea of who they're going to vote for. And I truly believe on the Republican side, there's a lot of people who are looking at Trump, and their final analysis is going to be, if I vote for Trump, can he beat Hillary Clinton? And that's what a lot of Republicans want to do, right? They want to win after 8 years of not having the White House. And so a lot of them, I think, are going to say, no, I don't think that putting Donald Trump up against Hillary Clinton is the best option. And I think there's some Democrats on the other side that are saying the same exact thing. I think, there may be more of a tendency to support Bernie Sanders because their party, I think, is more aligned with Bernie Sanders than necessarily Hillary Clinton. But I think there's a lot of people who say, is Bernie Sanders going to beat the Republican nominee? His views are a little bit out of touch.
My problem is, do I really believe, as I watch the Republican debate, and Jeb Bush is talking, and I'm seeing Donald Trump make funny faces.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Kind of like third grade.
Yeah, it's not
right?
really appropriate.
Hey, pay attention to me, not him.
Yeah.
And he's making these weird contortions of his face.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, if he goes to a G7 summit, if he goes to an international meeting,
Yeah.
and the presidents or prime ministers of other countries are talking,
Yeah.
is he going to be going with his face?
Right.
That's a scary movie.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there that support Donald Trump, and that's something I think everybody should take significant consideration of. And the reason is why. Why you have to ask yourself, why is that? And I think we've discussed that, enough. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of people out there who are supporting Donald Trump that have to ask the question of ideological consistency. And he has not been very ideologically consistent. He has been really, over the last decade, all over the place. And that's, I think, problematic because when you become the president of the United States and you've been all over the place ideologically and what your ideas are and how they've evolved and devolved back, when you get into the White House, what are you going to do? And I think that's a huge question mark.
You're more informed than I am, because to this day, I don't know what his ideas are.
Yeah. Well, that's.
I will make him like me. I will do better.
Right. There's a lot of platitudes in there.
Yeah, there's too much.
Yep. I agree with that.
And you sit there and say, wait a minute. If nothing else, I look at a Rand Paul, I can understand where he's coming from.
Right.
I may not always agree with him,
Yep.
but I can understand the man.
Yeah.
I can see where he's going, and Jeb, I don't know how he runs. I'm the better Bush.
Right. Yeah.
But Donald Trump, I still don't understand what he would do. It feels like he's running a campaign that says, she sucks, but I suck less.
Right.
So vote for me because I'm not as bad as her.
Yeah.
That's not what I want my president.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want somebody after 8 years of Obama, I want somebody I can admire, that I can feel good about.
And that's, I think, one of the most disappointing things about the president is that he had run as a uniter and as somebody who said that I would provide hope to a lot of people. And if you look at the polls and if you look at people's opinions, that didn't happen. I think he's been a very divisive figure, and I think that that's the biggest lost opportunity because he could have been post-partisan, as we were talking
The
about
only one I
before.
can see that was very happy with Obama's performance is past President Jimmy Carter.
Right.
Because he's no longer considered the worst president. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
but I mean, look at maybe at the last minute, people really start looking at Donald Trump and say, okay, this is all vapor.
Right.
You know, I'm sorry. I mean, even when you look at a candidate in the Republican Party that says, I wouldn't have a Muslim as president.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's un-American.
How can you paint? I remember back in the 60s when they said you can't have one of those there Catholics.
Yeah.
Them there Catholics, if you elect him as president, the Pope will move into the White House.
Yeah.
It's not American.
Right.
You don't paint an entire group with a broad brush.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we did, and I think that burnt, you know, the candidate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, this country was found on the principles of freedom and opportunity and liberty. And I think if you start taking those things away based on socioeconomics, based on gender, based on any
anything
identity,
but the person.
Exactly. You get into big, big trouble. And
So,
as a society,
If Trump isn't there,
I'll give you my prediction of how this thing will play out. I think Trump's going to lose Iowa. I think that's going to unravel his candidacy. The reason is it's premised on winning. He's going to make America great. Well, the only way you make America great is by yourself winning. You know, you have to continuously win. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. I built businesses. I've done all this successful stuff.
but he has nothing else, Ryan. He hasn't pointed to one thing he would do.
The second you lose and the results don't match your rhetoric, you're going to go down.
Remember when they first did the polls and he dropped
Yeah.
to Ben, and all of a sudden it's like, Iowa, how could you do this to me?
Right. And if he loses Iowa and then starts throwing insults at Iowa, and then he goes into New Hampshire weekend, I don't think he can survive losing New Hampshire as well. And I think that that's where a lot of this will open up. This, on the Republican side, I think this is going to be a very long race.
So now, who's going to come up?
I think New Hampshire is going to be a really important state because you got Chris Christie, you got Jeb Bush and John Kasich, and Marco Rubio, essentially. They say more establishment. I don't really believe that necessarily, but I think those candidates are trying to be an alternative. And if one of them emerges as sort of a second, third, or first place, they're probably going to continue their candidacy. If Jeb Bush loses New Hampshire, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to convince people, hey, I'm the guy, support me.
I don't know how he survives now anyway.
Yeah,
He's been, if anybody, talking at a reasonable level.
yeah.
He and Rand Paul seem to be the ones with the most substance.
There's a lot of substance.
But they're at the
between-
1% or some ridiculous level.
Yeah, they're not doing very well. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of people in this country who really like some of Rand Paul's ideas about liberty, about internet, you know, access and freedom. And I think that the problem was his candidacy persona didn't really play out in a positive way.
His father had the personality.
Yep. He was cheerful. He was happy. He
Somebody
didn't
you
seem
like.
annoyed to be up there.
Yes.
I think sometimes that Rand Paul comes off.
But now
as
you look
annoyed.
at Cruz and Rubio.
Yep. I think that that's eventually what it's going to come down to. You know, if you look at where Cruz is, I think he wins Iowa. I think Rubio has a shot to win New Hampshire. It doesn't mean he will. But South Carolina has been more predictive of Republican success in nominations than any. The only really the last time it didn't work out that way was last time.
Last time.
You know, and Newt Gingrich had won it. Mitt Romney had lost it. But I think that when it becomes a race between Ted Cruz and an alternative, I think there's a lot of people who don't like Ted Cruz's approach to how he's acted in the Senate. And it goes back to that idea that, you know, you have to be willing to work with people, and they don't want somebody who's going to read poetry and childhood stories on the Senate
Green
floor.
eggs and ham.
Yeah, I don't
in the
think that's-
Federal Register, seriously.
Yeah, I don't think that's acceptable. And I think there's a lot of Republicans who would agree with me that that type of behavior is not acceptable. The thing I think Rubio has to overcome is, you know, his immigration. You know, he had tried to create a solution where he came together with 4 other Democratic senators and 3 other Republicans and tried to say, okay, we're not going to deport 13 million people. Let's put a 15-year process in place. You have to pay fees, fines, all that kind of stuff. And it's gotten him, I think, damaged by his more conservative Republican base. And if he can overcome that, I think he will be the nominee.
Our chief of police, Tom O'Loughlin, laughed one day on the show. He said, if you close the borders today, build that 100-foot tall fictitious wall around the whole country.
Right. Yeah.
Impermeable. Nobody can get in or out. We're going to a Gestapo state. Everything is dictated. He said it would take 84 years to deport all the illegal aliens in this country.
Yeah. It's a long time.
It ain't going to happen.
I won't be around.
Well, but that was Tom's point, saying,
Right.
wait a minute, you can talk about deporting all the illegal people you want.
Yeah.
It's like talking about building a bridge to Mars.
Right.
Yeah, I guess theoretically,
Yeah.
but
I think people are very reasonable. I think where you have to start, though, is security. Because what people are not reasonable with is when their lives become in jeopardy.
Sure.
Or when something bad happens. And, I think that you have to create systems in place where, when you come to a state like Massachusetts, you can't just become automatically eligible for any sorts of benefits that you want, that there's a process and you have to prove your residency and you have to be here legally. I think people expect you secure the border through technology. We have drones, we have people, we have things that we can implement that we're not. And I think that that's a problem. E-Verify, having to look a nationwide E-Verify system that says, hey, this person is not here legally, therefore they can't be hired. If you start eliminating some of the loopholes first and concentrate there, I think you start to solve some of the problem. The second thing is, I think you got to look at the quota system that has been built, immigration's been built on. I think you got to throw it out, and you have to say, it's now a merit-based system. If you have a specific skill, we're the most generous country in the world when it comes to immigration. We have 1 million people who come to the United States legally and join our society.
and naturalization.
And naturalization. Yep.
It's not just immigration. If you're born,
Yep.
the minute the new fat man is born here,
Yep.
regardless of the fact that you and Stephanie are American citizens,
Right.
that baby is an American.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, that doesn't happen in Switzerland, doesn't happen in Saudi, you go through all these countries,
Right.
you couldn't be more liberal.
We are very, very generous when it comes to our immigration and how it plays out. And I think that, you have to say that's a good thing. Having people come to this country is wonderful, because if people are leaving this country, there's a big problem.
Right.
The second thing is, after you get through securing the border, securing our benefits programs, securing our employment opportunities, and looking at sort of that quota system and making it based on a merit. What can you bring to the United States of America, and why should you be able to come here? Can you give us a skill? Can you create the next job that's going to employ 100 of your neighbors? That system, I think, works better. Then you look at, okay, there's 13 million people here, and what are we going to do with them? I don't like the idea of amnesty. I don't think it's a good one. I think earned legal status is a better. It's not perfect.
No.
I mean, if you were to put a gun to my head, that's what I would say. Earned legal status and earning a legal green card over the course of a very long time, and proper behavior. I think those
But
people.
see, that's the piece that really bugs me. For once, I have to agree with the administration. If you can't deal with all 13 million, pick on the troublemakers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that is what. One of the things that frustrates me most about the town of Milford and what's happened here and the tragedies that we have all seen is that one of them at least could have been avoided.
Sure.
And if Secure Communities, which was a program that was put in place to say, if you're doing bad things and you're here illegally, bad things, breaking and entering, assaulting a police officer, assaulting a firefighter, all of which Nicholas Guaman did, and then, he had to kill somebody to even be considered a criminal.
You think about it. To me, that was an opt-in group.
Yep.
I've gotten a speeding ticket. I didn't get arrested, fingerprinted, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not like a parking ticket, a speeding ticket. You have to do something very bad.
Right.
You consciously have done something bad.
Yep.
You've been arrested. You've been fingerprinted. To me, you're opting into the group that says, check me out.
Yeah.
And why our previous governor said no to that.
Right.
I'll never understand.
And I think that, and I'll talk a little bit about a piece of legislation that's incredibly bothersome, but, I think that the bad guys, the bad players, the bad actors must go. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They must leave. And if you're assaulting our police officers, if you're robbing people, if you're doing these things, you've got to take a one-way ticket to another country, not the United States. Having said that, the argument that the governor used, Governor Patrick, which I totally disagree with, is that, well, the populations will not engage and help the law enforcement community. But the thing is, you have to actually commit a crime in order for secure communities to kick in.
You're opting in. You're doing something bad to get arrested.
Exactly. And so you've been arrested. The thing has already happened. The deed has already been done. And then secure communities kicks in. It's not the potential immigrant community.
We took the fingerprints, we sent them up to the database, and on the way down it said no.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Everything that could have happened already did.
Right.
You are in jail. Mm-hmm. You have been fingerprinted. Okay, and the only question is, do I let you go when they say those fingerprints don't belong to Ryan Fatman? They're Joe Smith.
Right.
And Joe Smith is wanted for these crimes.
Yeah.
Hold him.
Right. Yep. And I think one of the things that you have to consider too in the deportation, like violent illegal immigrants should go. But I also think you have to give some consideration to people who are breaking our economic laws, taking advantage of, economic laws for their own benefit and kind of undercutting a lot of people who otherwise be, working and competing with them. And I met a gentleman, I never forget this, on Route 140, who was a painter and a roofer, and he essentially was put out of business because he was being undercut by people who were not lawfully here, that were buying substandard paints and substandard shingles and underbidding him on every project, and essentially he just gave up. Those types of individuals, and what I've heard in my own study is that this is an operation. This isn't just one person playing a game. This is, you got a boss, and that boss goes out and hires people that are of their same ethnic background, and they do this purposely.
But Ryan,
and they're not good people.
When we were at Unison, we were really close to the Mexican border in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And I asked a question as to why should I worry about all this verification of employees? They said, because you personally could be responsible for the consequences.
Yep.
Boy, it got my attention.
Right.
Whoa. If you don't really verify, e-verify, whatever, I could go to jail? They said, yes. I said, okay, guess what?
Yeah.
There is no black and white question. It is either black or white, no gray.
Yeah.
I'm not hiring somebody unless I know for sure.
Right.
And I didn't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Now, if I choose, like you say, to systematically go around the system, well, then it's my fault.
Yeah.
And if I dry up the work.
Yeah. No, I agree. And those, to me, those are key components to this problem. But, you got to look at the people who are here, and you got to have a reasonable plan in place. And I think that that's what most people think. And I think, that's what Senator Rubio, now running for president, tried to achieve. And he got a lot of feedback that wasn't positive from his party about it. They felt that he had been sort of two-faced on it. And, the good thing is he, I think, has come to a realization that this didn't work and I'd do it differently. And I think he said he would do it the way that I've kind of described. And I think that people who vote for him or other people should be as forgiving of him as they've been of Donald Trump, who has said one thing and done the other.
God.
And it's on everything. He said he wants single-payer health care. He said Obamacare was a great law passed. Then he said he's not for those things.
Right.
He said that Hillary Clinton was a great Secretary of State. Now he said she's the worst Secretary of State. Most recently with Trey Gowdy, the individual, the congressman down from South Carolina, said that he did a great job during those hearings about Benghazi. Now he says he's a terrible person because he didn't, support him.
I saw the movie. Now I don't like what she did.
And those, and those types of things, I think that eventually they catch up to you. You can't be as ideologically inconsistent as he's been. And I think people need to consider
the problem
that.
I have is I think he's been very consistent. Whatever the wind blows, he moves.
Right.
I haven't heard a good position of his to say, this is what, except I'd build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. Oh, yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's not serious.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you've got Hillary and Bernie.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, I think that my mom is a longtime Democrat. She was born and raised in an Irish Catholic Democratic family. Their family was out campaigning for John F. Kennedy for president, for various local Democrats running for city council and mayor. And I think she summed it up best when Scott Brown and Elizabeth Warren were running against each other. And she just didn't identify with the party that she used to know. And I think that that's really a manifestation of where Bernie Sanders is at. You know, Bernie Sanders is not a registered Democrat. He's a registered independent who runs under the socialist label.
Right.
That's pretty significant. And you said it from the beginning. Socialism and capitalism did battle. It started, in the
And we won.
early 1900s, and capitalism kind of worked, and it won out. Now, there's a lot of people. I tried to do my best when I'm serving as a state senator to get before young people and to talk about my life and how I was able to get elected and how I got involved. But I also like to talk about our economy, because there's a lot of young people out there who say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's not capitalism.
Right.
And they have this idea of crony capitalism and carve-outs for that company and all, and they see that, and I think that they believe that it's rigged for a different group of people. And the problem is there's a lot of correct thought about that. And I think, there has to be sort of a going back to original capitalism, which is what John F. Kennedy said: a rising tide lifts all boats. And people are made better when other people are making money because they employ other people and they make better lives
I just have this hard time. I believe to this day that if Richard Milhous, if Nixon had gotten up and said, "I screwed up, I'm sorry," he would have never been impeached.
Yeah.
If he had said, "Forgive me, I blew it."
Right.
Americans don't kick dogs when they're down.
Yep.
But
Bill Clinton's a great example.
oh God. Now you got Hillary. Well, my emails didn't have any sensitive classified information. Oh yeah, they did.
Right.
I didn't do, oh yeah, I did. The Clinton Foundation raised $100 million, and I can't remember what the number was, but it was like 20% went to the actual cause.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's concerning to say the least. And, I think that there's 3 letters that really change everything for Hillary Clinton, and that's FBI. And when the FBI got involved, I think it got to a different level. At one point, it was just, okay, enough about our emails,
Right.
enough about our emails. But then all of a sudden, the FBI gets involved. Don't forget, the FBI indicted David Petraeus.
I was going to say, Petraeus got hung out to dry for doing a lot less.
You're absolutely right. And in fairness to the whole situation in the FBI, it took a long time for them to indict him, for them to recommend indictment. And so you never know what could happen to Hillary Clinton's candidacy. I will tell you this. I was at a wedding recently. My wife's cousin's fiance works for Lincoln Labs at MIT. And he said, you can't talk to him about Hillary Clinton, because he is under such strict guidelines that if he had done the same thing, he would have been escorted out of the building, he would have been arrested, and his whole family would have been detained and questioned about what they knew and when they knew it.
And rightfully so when it comes down to national security.
It's a pretty serious thing, and so it shouldn't be just brushed aside. This process is wonderful because the people get to decide, and they're going to get the best and the worst over the course of the next 2 months.
Well, we'll see in 3 months when you're back.
Absolutely.
One, we'll find out what the new fat man is.
It's either a boy or a girl. We're blessed by God to be having one, and very excited.
Congratulations! It's the most, as we talked before the show, he can't get more exciting than that.
No, it definitely can't. So.
And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank
It'll
you.
be interesting to see how the primaries turn out and who we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And as always, with any of the political issues, on this show, I've never asked you to vote one way or another, but what I've begged you to do is become informed. Get the information you need, whether you want a blue candidate, a red candidate, or hopefully, the one thing I hope people will do is vote their heart, and if it's purple, pick one or the other, but vote for somebody who you believe in, who you believe will represent you, but get out and vote. So thank you, good night, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today.
Excellent. Thanks for having me on.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just